So today our rebuild is a 2007 Lexus IS 250 all-wheel drive. I've had this one sitting in my hard drive for a while, tired of looking at the files, so we're going to put it up here. I rebuilt this one back in the middle of doing the mistake truck, and it's a perfect example of a car you can build if you don't have any bodywork abilities or you just don't like bodywork like me. This car is a total loss and had no body damage whatsoever from the accident. It's not a flood car, it's not a theft recovery. Can you guess what's wrong with it? Now, it's got some body damage from previous paintwork, so we're going to fix that, but it's not required. We could leave it alone and sell the car at a discounted price, but I like my cars to look good. So we're going to fix that. Car's pretty clean. It's fully loaded. The miles are low. It looks like a pretty straightforward build, but as we're going to find out, nothing is straightforward when it comes to rebuilding. So what are we looking at here? Well, we'll start with the back of the car. This is the rear trans mount and cross member. Transfer case has a little damage on it too where the mount goes. We got the trans pan and the valve body has some damage. This is the front engine cradle. And this is the engine oil pan, the upper pan, which is aluminum, and the oil pickup tube all have some damage. There's also a bracket in back here that's just 4 bolts. Protects the exhaust. That's easy to change. So we're going to change the engine, transfer case, and front diff, as well as the engine cradle. It's just swapping parts. Pretty straightforward job. Should be done today. Let's take a closer look. There's our oil pans, the lower and the upper. The subframe, engine cradle, trans pan, and that rear trans cross member. Whatever hit it went right down the center. Put a couple dents in the exhaust, not a huge deal. This little bracket for the back just covers the exhaust. It bent the fuel lines as well and actually gashed one of the evap system, which we can just replace with a rubber hose section if we want, because it's not a pressure hose. So the first thing we got to do is disconnect the oxygen sensors, which are inside the car. Thanks, Toyota. To fix this one, I got an engine, trans, and transfer case. And the reason I did that is I don't know how long it's been run without oil in it. It started up and it was nice and quiet, but I don't want to save this motor and 6 months down the road, whoever I sell it to has a problem. So just to be on the safe side, I got everything. We're not even going to take it apart. We're going to put it all in as an assembly. So we'll drain all of our fluids, start unbolting our exhaust, drive shaft. And drop the exhaust down. I'm going to pull the drive shaft out. I'm going to start unbolting our suspension. We're going to leave all the suspension in the car. Struts, knuckles. We'll take the lower control arms off so that they're out of the way. We'll unbolt everything up on the top. Our wiring harness, radiator hoses, heater hoses. And we can unbolt our subframe. Unbolt our rack and pinion. Little by little, in case you miss anything. So now our engine's out. Now we're going to lift it off the subframe. So now here's our new engine, trans, and transfer case. So we're going to swap everything over. Straighten out the fuel lines a little bit while the engine's out. It's a lot easier. Now we can fight with our drive axle. The subframe that I got with this engine and trans was no good, so I bought another one used. So I ran into a little trouble getting this axle out of here. This little bushing goes inside here and then the axle slides into it. But as you can see, all the rust in there builds up and they don't come apart like they're supposed to. You're supposed to take there's a bolt in here, you take that out and it should just slide right out. It slides together when they build it, but then it rusts. And 10 years of rust, it didn't want to come out. So I tried putting a knocker on here and pushing it out. I tried a spreader in here and I was afraid I was going to break this. It didn't budge. So what I did was remove the front differential on the other side and it left the end of the axle protruding, and I just took a sledgehammer, gave it a good hit, and it came out. This is what the other side looks like when the diff is removed, so I was just able to hit this and knock it right out. The diff's only held on by 1, 2, 3 bolts and the drive shaft, which is 6 more bolts. And it's pretty easy to take out. If this was in the car, I'd have to lower the subframe or remove the subframe to get it out. It came out with this piece on here, but then I was on the old axle that was junk. I was able to just heat this up, and as soon as I heated it up, it fell off. I cleaned it all up. So now I'll just push this one back in and then put a little grease on here, slide that in, and we're all good. To get this good axle out of the other motor, my oil pan was already broke, so I just took and broke all this out around it and it just fell out. And I was able to knock this one off of there pretty easily then. So when I was all done between the two motors, I had just enough parts to put this back together. Here's what I had to break out of this one to get this out. So as soon as I just hit it with the air chisel and it popped right off. As soon as I did that, this piece just fell out. And then I was able to get the other piece out. It didn't really matter because the oil pan was broke anyway, so I wasn't losing anything. So it's a little bit of work, but it does make the job possible. And now that mess is over, we can keep going. Put our differential back on. Change all of our accessories. I want to use all the ones from the original car. Change our wiring harness over. The wiring harness that came with the engine had some damage on it, so just switch the whole thing over. Put our AC compressor on. So now we can slide our used subframe underneath it. It's ready to go back in the car. Set it down, line it up. Takes a little patience. And bolt our frame up there. Bolt our trans cross member up in the back. Now we can lift it up. Put our drive shaft in. And start hooking up all our fuel lines and wiring harness. Heater hoses. Radiator hoses. Hook up our rack and pinion and start putting our suspension in. Put our air box back together. Now we do the suspension on this side. Fill up our antifreeze. And put our exhaust up. Afternoon crew showed up again. This time I made her work. Hook up our oxygen sensors. Thanks, Toyota. Put our sight shields back on. Put our cover on the bottom. Put our wheels back on. Our rebuild is done. Now it's time to take care of the stuff that makes it look bad. Somebody had repainted all this and the paint was checking and blotchy, so we're just gonna have to sand it down, prime it, and then paint it. We're gonna end up painting both doors on the driver's side, the quarter, the fender, the deck lid, and the rear bumper. So with a little bodywork magic, all our parts are painted. It's time to put it back together. So we'll throw the marker lights back in our bumper. And our little covers. We'll throw the bumper back on the car. Check and make sure it's clipped in on the top. And we can bolt it in. Put our covers on. We'll put our deck lid together. Just put the lights in. And bolt them in. Plug them in. Throw the headlight back in. We had the headlight out just so we could paint the edges of the fender. Same thing with leaving the bumper loose. Partially to get the headlight out and also so that they don't have to worry about taping it off. So this screw has supposed to be a Phillips screw, but the top was all tore up, rounded out. So I just used a pair of pliers to tighten it down, and then it has a little rubber grommet that goes around it. So you just put that on afterwards. Ideally, you just screw it in there with the rubber grommet on, but it doesn't work like that all the time. Put our sight shields back on. I did put a few miles on it in between putting the engine in it and doing the body work. That's why I put the covers on it before and then had to take them back off. Now put our driver's door back together. The belt molding on. That little cover in the corner. And put the mirror in. So I've put these mirrors on a few times and just figured out that if you lower the window, those bolts are easier to get to. I always either did it with the window out or up and struggled. Lower the window, it's real easy. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out the manufacturer's secrets. Put the door handle in and the lock assembly. I'll put our trimmer on the top of the window and the inside. Throw our door panel on. Now onto the back door. Throw our little glass in there. The window track back in. Screw the window track in. Slide the belt molding on. Put our gasket back in there. Now to get the rear door handle in, you have to disconnect the actuator or door latch. It's all one assembly inside. So you pull the 3 bolts out of that, and it allows you to get to the bolts on the inside. That was the same engineer that decided that the inside of the car was the best place for the plugs for the O2 sensors. Check our window, make sure it works. And put our door panel on. Doors are done. Now we got to put our spoiler on. We need that additional 15 horsepower. This one might actually be 25 horsepower because it does stick on as well as bolt on. Bolt it in. And we put our nameplate on. We just use the holes in the deck lid to line it up. A lot easier than our masking tape method. Almost makes up for the O2 sensors. And yes, in case you couldn't tell, I'm a little salty at Toyota for that. Put our little inside release handle in there. And all our little push buttons. So just when you think you're done, your build has other ideas for you. So I thought this was going to be an easy build. One weekend job, done. Figure I can make it in one video. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think is wrong with this car. The first person to guess right, I'll send a free t-shirt. I'll give you a hint. Somebody's been here before, and they didn't do a good job. So I'll give you guys until the next video comes out in this car with the answer. Hit the like button if you found this video interesting. Share it if you think somebody else might. Subscribe if you want to see how I get this thing running. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.